You're listening to The Marc Cox Show. Follow the show on Facebook. Facebook.com/The Marc Cox Show.
It's what's wrong with politics today. Hillary Clinton will say anything to get elected.
You know, just ignore that.
Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
And if you're second in the presidential race, you're last.
You're last.
Thank you. So if you ain't first, you're last, Hillary. That's what we're celebrating.
Your favorite Hillary.
My daughter sent to me something that I've got to share.
That was some weird
because apparently a lot of the snowflakes, a lot of the millennial snowflakes who broke down in tears the night of the election are having PTSD today. Not to make fun of those you who truly have PTSD, but their Donald Trump syndrome is kicking in, and they're on social media. One, in fact, from what she sent me here, claimed that she's mourning what happened 1 year ago today. She retweeted a picture of herself wearing a nasty woman shirt, not my daughter, some friend of hers, somebody she knows on social media, from 1 year ago today that said, what's nastier? Let's see. This nasty woman is off to bed early for hopefully the last night of only having men elected to the presidency and blah, blah, blah. And a friend of hers put, yeah, mine popped up today, too, on my Facebook feed. Goodbye. I'll be sobbing in bed all day. Are you kidding me? So they fail to remember us living through two elections of Barack Hussein Obama, and I certainly, for two elections of William Jefferson Clinton, was equally depressed. After none of those elections did I lay in bed and moan and whimper, or go onto the street with something on my head that looked like a member of the female anatomy. I just didn't do those things. It's ridiculous. The overreaction from the left is ridiculous, and they continue to complain about it. A year later, they're still complaining about it.
What I like to know is, did these people vote? Which is probably 50-50 that they didn't. And, Mark, you have to admit, even though William J. Clinton's politics are far from ours, it was a very entertaining presidency.
Well, of course it was
very entertaining. From a political standpoint, to just see him give speeches and do his political thing was just masterful.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
I'm not sitting here as some little woman standing by my man like Tammy Wynette. I'm sitting here because I love him, and I respect him, and I honor what he's been through and what we've been through together.
Frank and Claire Underwood.
Frank and Claire Underwood.
That's who they are. That's Frank and Claire Underwood.
And no kidding, in true life, Kevin Spacey, he's the Kevin Spacey character too, right? So far as we know,
I've never heard rumors that the president goes both ways, but.
Oh, I wasn't talking about that. I just mean that they sort of had an open marriage and all kinds of things happened, right? In House of Cards.
That you're insinuating.
Oh, no. I just meant the Kevin Spacey character, is in a little bit of trouble for what he's done. And I mean, there are allegations, and Bill had plenty of allegations.
Yeah, the Underwoods killed people. Clintons are alleged to have killed people.
Well, I didn't say that. You said that, just for the record. FEC, exactly. SEC, I should say. Anyway, on to this situation in Texas before we get any further along here. The Air Force now admits that it made a big mistake on this Devin Kelly kid.
They're saying it was a huge mistake. The Air Force Inspector General is now reviewing. It's encompassing the entire military because in 2012 he had a domestic violence conviction within the military courts. He beat his then wife. He beat her son, an infant. He fractured his skull. Because of that conviction, Pentagon rules say he should have been entered into the federal database. They are now investigating. Here's a representative from the Air Force.
That's why we're looking at all of the other cases like it.
All branches too? Do you think are all doing that?
We're working with the Defense Department Inspector General to look across the Defense Department. My responsibility is to make sure the Air Force is checked.
Plain and simple. Yeah. For when did this happen? Sunday? So for the past 48 hours, the left has done everything it can to scream and rant and rave about the need for more laws and more gun control. And the bottom line is just what we've said all along. No law that they proposed would have stopped what happened in Texas. And if the law that was in place on the books had been enforced properly, and this was clearly a glaring error, who knows how many others times this has happened, I don't know. But this guy should never have been able to buy a gun, which is what the left has wanted all along.
And even more sadly is even if he would have probably, if his name would have been entered in the database and he couldn't buy a gun, he probably would have secured one from somewhere else.
He would have stolen one or something like that. Right. So you see what the left gets at here. They chip away at it each time. What they're really after. Well, let's eliminate the loophole at gun shows. Well, there's no loophole at a gun show. There's not a loophole there. If you own a gun and you want to sell it to me, I can buy it from you. Here's what the left wants. When they talk about universal registration of weapons, what they want is to make it illegal for you to sell me a gun. But what then they want to do is build a list of who's got which gun, because that's ultimately what they're after. Yeah. Because in order for you to sell me a gun, you'd have to come forward and say you had the gun, and I'd have to come forward and say I bought the gun, and then the federal government has a list of who's got the guns. That's ultimately what they're after, which means even if you wanted to pass a weapon down to your child one of these days, you'd technically be breaking the law if you didn't go to the federal government and register that weapon, that sale. That's what they're after.
And that's what whenever I discuss gun control with the advocates, gun control advocates, I always say what you're ultimately talking about is confiscating guns, because there's not enough laws that you can put on the books. You can't guarantee that a criminal is going to follow the law. The only thing that we can get to where you want us to be is to ban people from having guns and taking them away from people. That's the only logical conclusion to their argument.
That ship has sailed. There are hundreds of millions of guns in this country, and if you could snap your fingers and make them all go away today, the people that are intent on killing would use trucks from Home Depot or pressure cookers or whatever else they needed to get a hold of, and they just build bigger bombs. That's what they would do.
Mark, I saw a thing on National Geographic this year where it showed, I think they were over in the Philippines, and it was this guy and his family. They made guns out of scrap guns and scrap metal. After they were finished making the gun, they would sell it to somebody for like $150, and then it would go to the next chain, and it would add more to it.
Sure.
And because the gun didn't have any registration or anything to it, that made it valuable. But it showed just the whole trail of this gun being made in the Philippines to getting to the United States, how much it was marked up, how much value it was because it didn't have any serial numbers. And I already kind of knew that argument, but when I saw that, I was like, there's no way you're ever going to stop guns.
No.
You're never going to stop
You're
it.
never. They got 3D printers that can make them now.
Exactly.
It's Election Day, and looking forward instead of looking backwards, today Prop P is on the ballot in the city. They're asking people to go pay to approve a half-cent sales tax that would go to public safety, firefighters, police officer raises, some to the prosecutor's office, things like that. Yeah. Your thoughts?
I just don't understand some of the activists and some of the politicians who represent North St. Louis, and every single night when you look in the newspaper the next morning, there's either a murder or a shooting. The police morale is already probably low because they feel the Lyda Cruz and the mayor has thrown them under the bus. I just don't understand why you don't want to pay the police and lower their morale even more when your neighborhood and your community is a war zone. I don't understand the mentality of being mad at the police while your community is crumbling.
But on the bright side, do you believe in unicorns and Santa Claus? Because we can add one to that list for you. We found the one tax that liberal Democrats don't support.
Yeah.
They finally found a tax in the city that they don't support, and that's because the money would be put in a lockbox only for public safety, and they couldn't get their mitts on it. That's all that's about. and a little bit of vengeance on their part against the police department.
I think, and I agree with you, I think it's overwhelmingly probably 70-30, just a vengeance part. Why should we give them money when they're killing us?
I think, well, that's their
that's the
working theory anyway, even though it's not true. Chris Arps, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. We're going to talk more about our social media wall. Hashtag MCS971 if you're on Twitter. It's going to pop up on a screen here in the studio. We're starting that today. We'll talk about it more. In the next hour, we're also going to get Eric Pratt on here from Gun Owners of America to talk about this push for more gun control. It's all coming up today on the